How can they win this one? We're going to discuss one way that they need to continue to attack teams, and that's by leaning on the offensive line. We'll discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there tuning in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hey, just like we talked about a little bit in the first segment, this Ole Miss defense isn't necessarily the toughest defense that Oklahoma will face or has faced all season long. You go look at just some of the raw numbers here, and they're allowing 22.6 points per game, which, that's pretty solid, right? 53rd in the nation in points per game. From a passing perspective, they are, I passed it, 38th in the nation, allowing 195.6 points per game. Okay, that's pretty okay. But it's where they rank in rushing yards allowed that I think gives Oklahoma an opportunity to be very successful. They're 99th in the nation, allowing 166.7 rushing yards per game. Teams are running the ball 35 times per game against them, and they're allowing an average of 4.7 yards per carry, which is tied for 108th in the nation. So there's opportunities there. And lo and behold, Oklahoma found a bit of a run game this past weekend against South Carolina, which is really encouraging. So let's look at what they've done in some of these games this season against some interesting competition. I'm not going to say they're better or worse than Oklahoma offensively or running the football, but against Georgia State, first week of the season, Georgia State in the game, Ole Miss won 63-7. Ole Miss allowed 35 carries for 191 yards. 5.5 yards per carry. That was the week one opener against Georgia State. Sure, they only allowed 7 points. Got a huge blowout win. But again, they allowed 191 rushing yards in that one. Only 69 passing yards. So Georgia State went into that one saying, hey, we're going to run the football. And they did. They were very successful. 5.5 yards per carry. Really good performance. Kentucky, 37 carries, 172 yards, 4.6 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns. Again, that was a 7-point loss for the Wildcats in a game that it was pretty close throughout. At halftime, it was 17-13. Going into the fourth quarter, it was 27-20. So, Kentucky was very much in that game throughout. Then against Arkansas in week 3, the Razorbacks ran for 221 yards on 37 carries and 4 touchdowns. That was a big shootout win, 41-35 for Ole Miss. And again, in a game that was close in the first half and in the second half. Ole Miss only outscored Arkansas by 3 in the second half. And, it was a big rushing day. Taylor Green had 115 yards on 14 carries. Mike Washington had 65 yards. Braylon Russell, 37 yards. So it was a really balanced rushing attack for Arkansas in that one. And they just couldn't stop them. Tulane, even though they lost 45-10, they were able to run for 178 yards on 4.6 yards per carry against Ole Miss. LSU was kind of the one team that wasn't able to run against them. They only ran for 57 yards on 22 carries, 2.6 yards per attempt. They're terrible at running the football. But then the next week, LSU went and ran for 166 yards against South Carolina. So I don't know what to make of all that. Washington State, a team that is not great this year, they ran for 127 yards on 4.5 yards per carry against Ole Miss in a 24-21 loss. Again, a game that was close going into the fourth quarter. And then this past week against Georgia, the Bulldogs ran 49 times for 221 yards and 4.5 yards per carry. So there's opportunity for Oklahoma to continue to build on the rushing attack that we saw against South Carolina, and they need to continue to do that. We saw them really lean in the first quarter, give Tory Blaylock, he got 4 carries on that opening drive, which is absolutely huge. Remember, he only had 2 carries in the entire first quarter against Texas. That's how you want to go about this game. I expect John Mateer to continue to get better, further removed from his thumb injury or thumb surgery, and be more comfortable throwing the ball down the field, but you still don't want to just put everything on his shoulders. You don't want to put the weight of the world on his shoulders. You want to let the run game help dictate some of this stuff. You want to play, run the ball, play defense, because that's how your team's built. And so continue to feed Tory Blaylock, continue to feed Xavier Robinson. This has a chance to be another big game for those two. And if it is, Oklahoma's going to have a great chance to win this one. You don't necessarily want to get into a back and forth shootout with Ole Miss. You want your defense rested. So if you can lean in on that performance from the Oklahoma offensive line against South Carolina, and you can go and be a better version of that even against Ole Miss, and that's going to give you the chance to have a big victory. I mean, this is a top 10 opponent. We talked about how maybe South Carolina isn't as good as anybody expected. They might not be a good team, but they're better against the run than Ole Miss is. Again, we talked about Ole Miss. They ranked 99th in the nation in rushing yards allowed. South Carolina ranks 100 or 74th in the nation currently in rushing yards allowed. They only allow 3.9 yards per carry, while Ole Miss allows 4.7 yards per carry. So, that South Carolina team might not be great, might not even be good, but they're a little bit better against the run than Ole Miss is. And I think that's definitive. I think that says something. So that should be the focus again this week is let's establish the run early. Let's just continue to lean on it. Even if they stop you for a 2-yard gain, just keep pounding away. Use Tory Blaylock, use Xavier Robinson. Let their physicality help set the tone for this football game. You have a physical team, a physical defense, an offensive line that played the most physical game they've played since the Alabama game last year. Let them build on that by coming into this one saying, we are going to set the tone physically with our offensive line. And we are going to take the air out of the football. And by doing so, put more pressure on Trinidad Chambliss to have to make a play every single time he's on the field. And if you can do that, that's going to set your defense up for success. That, hey, if we can force Ole Miss to have to throw the ball, have to get out of balance, have to rely on, who has been a good quarterback. Trinidad's been great. But again, second half last week, he did not find a groove. If that carries over into this week at all, that's going to feed right into what Oklahoma wants to do. So I'm excited for, again, to see this run game take another step. I think they can do it. I think this is a team that they can absolutely run the ball against. John Mateer, I'm looking forward to seeing if he's more comfortable running the ball this week than he was last week. And if he finds more success running the football, just commit to it. Continue to do what you did. Spread them out. Get the tight end out of the formation. Get him out wide. Make them bring either a safety or a linebacker with him so that you have lighter boxes to run against. It was very successful last week. It could be successful again this week. And if they crowd the box while you're spread, that's when you throw it wide. That's when you use your screen game to the wide receivers to try and take advantage of the light situations on the outside. So just pound away, force them to adjust to you, and then you'll have an opportunity to hit some things down the field. It has the potential to be a really good rushing performance once again for the Oklahoma Sooners. Again, got to lean in on it. The offensive line has to show up with a tough, nasty physical mindset like they did last week against South Carolina. And like Brent Venables has talked about on multiple occasions, just moving the pile forward 1 yard at a time. And if the offensive line can build on that and they can show that, then I think they're going to have a great offensive performance again this week against the Ole Miss Rebels. We're going to have Jay back on our Friday show. He's got a long week out in Vegas doing stuff for his day job. And so this week is a lot of John. We'll have our crossover edition with Stephen Willis of Locked On Ole Miss for Thursday. So you want to check that out. Stephen's doing a great job covering all the angles from the Ole Miss Rebels over there. So you want to check out his work for sure. But we'll have a great conversation with him for Thursday. But then Jay will be back Friday to give us all of his thoughts, which I know he's got a lot of thoughts on this Ole Miss game. And so we'll be excited to hear about that.